Night and day are catching hell. People think I'm doing well just because I sing a few calypso. But that is my misery. Calypso don't make money, but most of them don't know that I have my axe to grind, just like any other man, existing in poverty and this giant ghetto land. But I intend to hang on. Tell them for me no dice. I ain't gonna eat lice. I ain't gonna grow old sitting in the cold, not me. No way, they go have to beat me. They go have to eat me, or their heads go roll. Tell them I say I was born in this land, I go die in this land. Nobody go run me from where me come from. Nobody go run me, lad. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. Me mama must yam. Me papa must yam. Me woman must yam. Me pickle must yam. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me, lad. Nobody go run me. Life ain't much for us to choose. Some we win and some we lose. But sometimes life is so confusing. I had a lot of friends one time whom I used to wine and dine and gave them bread when they need it. Now most of them against me, take me, make the enemy, simply because I am not what they all want me to be. And with their political views I can't agree, but tell them for me no dice. I ain't gonna eat lice, I ain't gonna grow old sitting in the cold, not me algae. No way, they gonna have to beat me, they gonna have to eat me, or the heads go roll. Tell them I say I was born in this land, I go die in this land. Nobody go run me from where me come from. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. Me mama must yam. Me papa must yam. Me woman must yam. Me pickney must yam. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. Let go. 12 years I at CBC, work at Halcyon for free, when they went bankrupt and had no money. Because of my tolerance, they gave me the assurance the job belongs to me. But I hear some people high in our society, they don't like my calypso, because they can't control me, so they plan to kick out my ass. Tell them, party no dice. I ain't gonna eat lice, I ain't gonna grow old sitting in the cold, not me shorty. No way, all you have to beat me, all you have to bury me more than 6 feet and more. Tell them I say I was born in this land, I go die in this land. Nobody go run me from where me come from. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. Me mama must yam. Me papa must yam. Me woman must yam. Me pickney must yam. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. Election come and gone. Some of them treat me with scorn. Others put the whole point against me. Tell them I don't give a damn. I am going to sing my song exactly as I see it. Whoever want to make me a political enemy, who feel that they're playing God and could wreck me life for me, tell them I ain't running away. Tell them for me no dice. I ain't gonna eat lice, I ain't gonna grow old sitting in the cold, not me shorty. No way, all you have to beat me, all you have to bury me more than 6 feet and more. Tell them I say I was born in this land, I go die in this land. Nobody go run me from where me come from. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me, lad. Nobody go run me. Me mama must yam. Me papa must yam. Me woman must yam. Me pickney must yam. Lord, nobody go run me. Nobody go run me.
And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. What an appropriate way to start off our program tonight. Nobody go run me from where me come from. They're going to have to beat me. They're going to have to bury me more than 6 feet and more because I'm not running from Guyana. They can invoke whatever they want to invoke. I am not running from Guyana because that's my country. That's our motto as we move forward in this Christmas season coming up, because it's going to be a working Christmas, because the vultures are at the gate. They're at the gate. Last week we saw the arrest of Winston Jordan. Just a couple of hours after, wanted bulletin for Rickford, Burke. What are they looking for? What are they looking for? They're looking to silence opposition. They're looking to shut us up. One minister went to New York and boasted a few months ago that there is no opposition. He's begging for opposition. Please, I beg the men, give us some opposition. And then a few months later, they're looking to silence opposition. Well, I tell them, me picnic must nam, me mama must nam, me woman must nam, and nobody go run me from Guyana. We have to stand firm. So tonight, we're going to be talking about those two incidents that I mentioned. We're going to be talking about the Winston Jordan's arrest. We're going to be talking about the wanted bulletin for Mr. Rickford Burke. And as usual, we're not going to be BSing. We're going to be talking serious business. So we have assembled a team of lawyers tonight to explore this matter from the legal standpoint. You know, it's not just about politics. Politics is linked to the law, it's linked to economics, it's linked to sociology, it's linked to international relations, and sometimes they get us because we narrowly look at these things, and we want to break out of that. So tonight, we're going to be looking at those incidents, the arrest of Jordan, the wanted bulletin for Rickford Burke. Are they bad in law? What are they hiding behind? We hear all kinds of things about the cybercrime bill and whether Mr. Burke is being fingered correctly. Are they stretching this cybercrime bill? We hear about sedition, but we know that sedition was struck out of the draft bill. What are they up to? A lot has been raised about the Winston Jordan incident. Misbehavior in public office. What is that? What is really misbehavior in public office? What is it from the legal standpoint? What is it from the political standpoint? When someone is part of a government that makes decision, where does the buck stop? The finance minister? What? We'll talk about implications for the law and by extension for politics and society. So here we are. You can share the link, let everyone know that we're on tonight, Politics 101, and we are going to be talking about the news of the day. We have an all-star team tonight because we do have all-star teams. And since the word or the words role models are very much in the news, we have a role model team tonight. We have the young Turk in the room, Mr. Darren Wade. and everybody knows him. He's perhaps the hardest working attorney at law. Young man who was entered the legal and political fray, not as a prima donna, but as someone who understands his relationship and his commitment and his responsibility to the larger society. Welcome, Aaron, to Politics 101. Again, we have
so thank you.
Peters. Yes, go ahead, Aaron.
No, I was going to say thank you for having me here, and a good night, a pleasant evening to you and to all your listeners and fellow panelists.
And we have Mr. Selwyn Peters out of Canada. Selwyn is one of those persons like myself who's been getting a lot of bad name. We live outside of Guyana, so Guyana don't belong to us, and so we have no business in what's happening in Guyana and all that stuff. But let me say this: thanks to technology in the 21st century, we can be physically outside of Guyana, but very much part of what's happening in Guyana. I have Guyana on my brain, I have Guyana on my mind. I wake up in the morning, the first thing thinking about is Guyana. I go to bed, the last thing I'm thinking about is Guyana. That's my homeland. And I think I talk for you, Selwyn.
You do. You see my Guyana flag in my office?
There you go.
It sits there 22 stories high.
There you go. So we're not worrying with them with the differentiation they're making between who outside and who inside. Mr. Christopher Ram, who was on Politics 101 a few weeks ago, and of course he was new and helped to give Politics 101 a lot of publicity in the mainstream media. One newspaper carried 3 stories from Mr. Ram's interview. Christopher Ram, attorney at law, a chartered accountant, and civil society political commentator. He belongs to this new group that you've been seen a lot in the news, Article 13. We've got to do a show on those that Article 13 group and have them on to tell us about what they're doing. Welcome, my brother, Chris, once again to Politics 101.
Thanks, David.
And last but not least, the leader of the Alliance for Change, Mr. Kemaraj Ramjatan. Kemaraj is part 1 of this show. He was on the very first Politics 101 show, and he may have been on about 20 times after that. Come on, brother. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hines.
Let me start with you since I have you here. Let's talk a little bit about the Winston Jordan arrest. What was that all about, Kemaraj?
I have made the statement a number of places, but I'll repeat it here. It is to intimidate and drive fear into the quality individuals, the very brave individuals that can counter the propaganda that the PPP is coming up with to, in a sense, reassure their supporters that they're in charge. And it is criminalizing a very good person in the eyes of what the PPP feels is its base, and that is basically what the whole idea is. Look, the PPP's leadership believes that they're dealing with a lot of criminals in the opposition. They felt that especially that what I regard as a little sunny period during the 5 months after the elections, that a whole lot of Guyanese and a whole lot of outsiders believe that the PNC especially, along with the AFC, are a pack of criminals. And so they are merely doing an enforcement exercise against criminals when they go after the Winston Jordan, when they go after all these GCOM officials and so many people after that, go after public servants, about 2,000 of them, dismissing them and so on. And, this thing is to drive fear, to shut them up into silence, not wanting to even talk anything that they should know about, especially a Winston Jordan, who we all know knows so much about the PPP's budgets and also the coalition's budget, and can make the distinctions as to where we were positive, where we were far miles ahead of the PPP and so on. And so the intent now, not to stop until the opposition is buried, it seemed. And they're having this chokehold, as it were, thinking that they can continue the chokehold a very long time more. But as I said, this is resentment that is building that could make the place very dangerous. And, I doubt whether they could stop what it is that they want to start.
Chris, let me bring you in here. You are a rule of law person, and you are a person who pays close attention to the letter of the law. What is your take, given those two things that I mentioned there? What's your take on the Winston Jordan arrest?
Well, your question is slightly different from the bar you have, the charges against Winston Jordan and Rickford Burke.
Yes.
My information is that no charges have been laid. And I think in at least the case of Winston Jordan, I can say that information comes from him. So that no charge has in fact been laid against Mr. Jordan.
Right.
What is a fact?
But what is the charge? Let's talk about the charge that has been bandied around.
Well, I wouldn't want to talk about something that's being bandied around.
Okay.
I'd rather that we address the issue, because I do regard the matter concerning the arrest and especially the handcuffing of Mr. and I'd say my friend, Winston Jordan. I regard that as really unacceptable. There was absolutely no need for that type of action. We all know that at law there's a presumption of innocence. Mr. Jordan did not pose any threat. He did not pose any risk. And in my view, there was surely no justification by any measure that Mr. Jordan should have been put in handcuffs. It's clear that Mr. Jordan is not, and we all know he has a few issues, and it sounded to me like inhuman treatment, and it's not going to help our political culture. I must say that I did not find it acceptable that Winston Brassington and Ashley Singh were also put in handcuffs by the previous administration. The circumstances may be different, but I'm thinking this kind of treatment being meted out to individuals who pose no threat. In the case of Ashley Singh and Winston Brassington, I don't think there was any justification, as I don't believe there's any justification in the case of Winston Jordan. That would be my introductory remark.
Okay. Let me bring in Darren. Darren, you were one of the lawyers, along with Roysdale Ford, who was there on the day when Mr. Jordan was arrested. Chris is saying that no charge has been laid. Bring us up to date on what really happened on that day.
Oh, right. Thank you, Brother Ines. Before I get into your question, I just want to put one thing in perspective. Dr. Ashley Singh was never placed in handcuff by the APNU administration, nor by the police. Mr. Ashley Singh was placed in handcuff by the courts. It is a procedure when you're charged that once you're being placed on bail, you're placed in handcuff and placed in the chute. the court. So he was never placed in any handcuff by the administration or through by the police. It was basically the process at the magistrate court. We also are aware where similar charges, fraudulent charges, would have also been placed against Irfan Ali, Mr. Anil Nandalan, and so forth. And when they appeared in court, they were placed on their own recognizance. So they signed self. When officials from the former administration were placed before the court, they were placed on monetary bail, on money bail, and as a result of that, all of those officials were placed in handcuffs. So I just want to differ from Mr. Ram, who's my good friend and teacher, or courtesy to him. But I just want to say that Mr. Ashley saying what he put it out, there was never placed in handcuffs by police. It was the process of court, and when we look at it at the process and how our officials are being treated, was one it is inconsistent. Thank you. In relation to your question, in relation to the current status with Mr. Jordan, based upon my information, no charge was read to him at the moment by the police, or he was not even placed before the court for those charges to be officially read by the court. He was arrested, of course, in relation to the allegation of misconduct, in relation to a piece of land that was transferred to BK. My instructions that I would receive, it was based on a cabinet decision. In addition to that, my other instruction is that those lands were leased by the previous administration. So Mr. Brian Tiwari was already in occupation and possession of that said piece of land. I think it's that mud lot is what you call that area. And a part of the lease, there were some arrangement based upon my understanding and instruction, whereby Brian Tiwari was allowed to purchase the property upon expiration of the lease for a far less than what he bought it for. I believe it's a sad occurrence. It is what Mr. Kemra mentioned. It is a crime done. I think Mr. Jordan recently, like have been in the news pointing out some of the issues that we are currently facing in Guyana. For example, the borrowing. Mr. Jordan would have already concluded that while we may not touch the money currently that we have, the income from the oil and gas sector, the amount of borrowing we have would have surpassed that. Basically, all of the money would have been dissipated. All the money is done. Without even touching it, without even spending it, we would have surpassed that in our spending. So I believe it's victimization. It's a way to silence. I believe we are heading to a totalitarian regime. That's how it was ruled, by fear, and I believe that's what it is. They want person to back off. So I believe it's important for us all to have this type of conversation to show that we will not back down. And if someone say we kill one Rastaman, another Rastaman rise up. So those words, I can't remember who words that is. So thank you very much, and those are my introductory remarks.
Let me ask you this before I move to Selwyn. Do you all expect charges to be laid anytime soon? What are the indications?
Well, it's PvP, and vindictiveness of the game. They don't know to do anything proper. They are having a miserable governance. Everything they touch is a disaster. Nothing is going in their way currently in relation to governance. So to have some sort of relevance, to appeal to the base, one will expect that they may want to charge Mr. Jordan. Who knows? They may want to charge me. God rebuke that. But you can't save me. They may want to charge you, and so on. But it's the PvP we're doing. And once they feel that one is going to challenge, they want to attack you. And I've no, that is what they would want to do. So I wouldn't, they, not only Mr. Jordan, they may want, we remember the days, when people, we had the Kwame Wing. Kwame Wing did nothing wrong as a citizen, a decent man who was gunned down. But that is the PvP history, one of fear, My office on Hatfield Street. And the PvP, and sometimes we always forget to mention, that's how they rule, by fear. And my office on Hatfield Street. When I look up the road, somebody pointed out to me, the Abrams family, I think it was 1964 he was the PS under the premiership of Mr. Jagan, who PvP burned that man that out and killed the entire family. I believe there were 1 or 2 survivors. But we forget these things, We forget these things, and this was in 1964. Where entire family were slaughtered by they have an history of violence. continue to govern by fear, and that is what they do. I have a wife who prays for me every day, who's out there, who's concerned, Another person that we need to pray for is people like Sherry Duncan, who is brave, to come out and to challenge these people, So I would not be surprised by anything vindictive by the people, because that is the game. They don't know anything better, and they are failing miserably in governance. Thank you.
Selwyn, let me bring you in here. Why, Mr. Jordan, arrest him, handcuff him, if you don't intend to charge him? What's going on? Your audio.
It's an assertion of authority, regardless of how illegitimate the authority is. So, certainly, Mr. Jordan is a prominent figure, whether it's on your show or on Sherry Duncan's show or Mark Benskoff's show or on other shows. And so he is quite a prominent voice in the community. So if you humiliate him, if you sort of make him look small, then you're certainly punching at his base, and you're certainly demoralizing them in some way. I mean, it's the same bad actors in Soko that tried to do the same thing to Paul Slow outside of the Georgetown Magistrate Court when we went there on October 15th. It's the same group of men, and as you know, I have to disagree with Darren Wade on one point. You don't have to handcuff someone and pass them down a chute at the magistrate court. That didn't happen to Paul Slow because I was there. When Paul Slow, we walked Paul Slow up to the court, and Paul Slow remained in the court until his bail was posted. Someone went down and paid his bail, and he walked out. No handcuffs at all on him. No passing down the chute. So it's not necessary that someone has to pass down that chute, because it's a process in the magistrate court. There are exceptions, and I had one exception to cite there, and I've cited it.
Chris, let's bring you in here. Abuse of power is what is being leveled at the government. This arrest of Mr. Jordan is an abuse of power. Where do you come down on that? Christopher Ram, is he with us? Mr. Ram seems not to be with us. Kemraj, well, okay, here we are.
No, I was with you, David, but I was just putting the phone on silent for a moment.
Go ahead.
Was
Did
there
you
a
hear my
question?
I'm saying the question of abuse of power. That it is being said here that this whole business of arresting Mr. Jordan is an example of the abuse of power by the PPP. Where do you stand on that?
I think what Selwyn said, it was the demonstration of authority. So it could be extended to be an abuse of power, but yes, it's to show who is in charge. So I don't have any disagreement with what Selwyn said, and I do believe that more often than not, Soko seems to be in a way neither fish nor fowl, and again, it has happened in different administrations. We need to be clear as to how the police operates, who has control of Soko, and what sort of standing orders they should be confirming with. I think, and David, you talked about this question of rule of law. We must behave like a civilized society. We must behave like if we were a society with rules, and this is why I'm so offended as to how Winston Jordan was treated. Winston Winston, he has served so many administrations. He worked under Jagdeo, he worked under Ashley Singh, he worked with Asghar Ali, and he's given human service to Guyana. He is this a mistake? I've heard persons say that this transaction with Brian Tiwari had its origin in the PPP. So those are some of the things we need to understand. We need to have the facts at our disposal. Is this an effort to get at Brian Tiwari, to use Winston Jordan to get at Brian Tiwari? Again, you can speculate. But to me, I think Selwyn is correct. This is a demonstration of power.
Chris, you raised the question of Soko and control. Do you believe that Soko is being controlled or at least influenced by the political government?
I would say that has been the case from the beginning of Soko. When the first person was brought out of retirement from the army and put to head Soko, which is supposed to be part of the police force. Did the Police Service Commission have a role in that discussion, in that decision? I think not. So, what we have a cycle of missteps. And unfortunately, each misstep seems to lead us further down a rabbit hole. I think we should be clear. Soko, if it's part of the police force, as it is at the moment, it should come under the Commissioner of Police. And there should only be a policy relationship between the political directorate and the police. The police is overseen. The guardrail for the police is the Police Service Commission. I'm not even sure we have a Police Service Commission that is functioning at this stage.
Kemraj, let me bring you in here, Kemraj, because you were very much part of the government when this decision was made. Bring us up to speed. Bring us up to speed on the origins of that whole thing and the sale of the land, how your government dealt with it, etc., etc.
Well, let me just indicate that the Soko was always part of the police force. There were another member of cabinet in the coalition government who had felt that it should come under the Attorney General. And I disagreed totally. And we made it quite clear that it was the Commissioner of Police. And all appointments will be made in accordance with the Police Commissioner. And the application was out for the heading of that unit on a contract basis, and the Commissioner of Police, then I think it was Mr. Silal Prasad, got the same army officer because it necessitated anti-money laundering activities, a whole set of issues at the border, and a number of other issues with police force. So just a slight difference there from what happened under the coalition term. We indicated too that when we passed the SARA Act, State Assets Recovery Act, that the Soko also will play a role in investigating those who would have taken state assets and so on. And although it was a civil matter, investigation had to be done by somebody. To that extent, then, they had the jurisdiction and was granted that jurisdiction. As I have indicated, almost every speech that I gave whilst minister, I indicated to the police, and the speeches are there, that they must not in any way be political interference in their operational matters. Operational matters is who they will arrest, who they will do whatever with in relation to charges and prosecution and so on. Do not ever take any instruction from even a Ramjatan or any other political, including the president. And that was made clear. The president even commended me for making that statement. And so they had total autonomy over what is called operational matters. And that's a distinction I want people to understand. Policy is largely the ministerial portfolio. So if you're going to make a policy stating that this is how you must handle, that has to come out of the executive branch. But when under the Police Act, you have to ask somebody for a statement, you tell him his right to remain silent, this, that, he's a suspect in the matter, and so on. It is important that all those which have been statutized and put into judges' directions, they must abide by that, and that is their boss, not the Minister of Public Security or the Minister of Home Affairs. Now, on the matter that you are talking about as to whether Winston Jordan's action was abuse, or as the police told him, I understand, that it is misfeasance in public office. That is total trash, quite frankly. And I want to say that all misfeasance is but a wrongful exercise of lawful authority. That's the germ of what abuse or misfeasance is. Wrongful use of lawful authority. What could have been so wrongful in that when Winston Jordan decided to make a sale to Brian Tiwari after the matter was brought to court and the court was urging a settlement? Remember, this matter happened since 2013 or 2012, when the PPP government, or even earlier than that, when the PPP government had sold that wharf to Brian Tiwari. And then there were disputes in relation to certain terms. And the PPP government had carried him to court. And we continued the litigation to the extent whereby the matter came up for trial, I think, before a certain judge. And a certain judge was saying, based on the circumstances of the case, that this matter is a fit one for resolution. Because there is the wharf, he has possession for a number of years, there's a certain price and all of that. And I think in 2017 or 2018, it was then sold. Before it was sold, it came to cabinet because a report had to be made on all litigation of that nature. We had asked that these be brought. Any minister you must have an annual kind of review as to all litigation brought against that ministry, if it's public security, who had brought whatever the things were. And it was brought. And upon the advice of cabinet, because the president was asking cabinet, how should we move forward? Because it is largely a presidential decision. Remember, ministers are advisors to the president in their respective portfolio, where they will have what is called some experience or expertise. And so the president did ask, what do we do? We indicated, all of us, that it is an opportune moment. If the court is asking for a settlement, settle. And settle on the terms that you find best. Now, that is not a wrongful exercise of lawful authority. It is not as if he hid it away from the cabinet and the president and he went and did his own contracting. He came to the authority. Higher up to a minister is the cabinet, and the highest above all is the president. And you know that the president's decision, you can't challenge the president's decision. But it is effectively a presidential decision. If when the president now tell him, having heard cabinet, proceed to sell, and you get a cabinet paper signed by Joe Harmon, proceed to sell, because it comes from the president. Now, if you can't charge the president, how the bloody well you could go and charge Winston Jordan, even if it was wrongful? And so the circumstances of this, and by the way, an additional circumstances is that about 3 weeks ago to about a month ago, this defense of cabinet approval being granted and the president's assertiveness on what cabinet has addressed and so on being stated was all done in an affidavit of defense by Winston Jordan to the Attorney General, our present Attorney General's filing an action against him that he had done something wrong and that he got to pay out of his own money suing him for damages. he had filed that as a defense in a civil claim brought by the Attorney General Anil Nandalal. So they were well aware. Now, if you as Attorney General felt that it has a civil claim status, how are you going to prove beyond the reasonable doubt that he intentionally was doing something wrongful when you got the cabinet papers and all of that? How could you do that? Why didn't he go and sue the president? Is the president ultimate authority here? Because we are mere advisors. We then advise and the president said proceed with the cabinet decision. And at that advisorial meeting, that is what happens. That is what happens in cabinet. Now, some of these people don't understand cabinet responsibility. And they're gone, but it is because of the fact they want, with these kinds of nuances and mischief right now, to dehumanize, to demoralize, and to, in a sense, disparage the man. That is what they did, why they did what they did. The thing has absolute, and then, I want to make the distinction because a lot of people want to say how we did very nasty things to them, and do for do is a good thing. Bull. Let me say this. We took people like Christopher Ram, Anand Gulsaran, and a whole set of them, and we did what is called forensic audits of the various departments we had come to realize might have had corruption. And these 53 audits, I think it is 53 audits we did for government ministries, departments, and all of that, was a stock taking to find out indeed if things were indeed wrong, because the press used to write about it, people in the opposition used to question it, and a number of things, we used to see brought out into the public. So we did that. That is what a good government does when it takes over after a 23-year tenure of a known opposition. And that is what we did. And inside of these forensic audits, they recommended that more police investigation should be carried out. And indeed, the cabinet decided that in those where there must be more police investigation, we then took it to the commissioner, Mr. Silal Prasad. And he then said, well, fine, his fraud squad and his SOKU are going to take it from there. And they took it from there. Now, I must tell you this, that I had indicated to Silal Prasad and to the SOKU head at the point in time, that whenever these things are done, please, because I had some hesitation about, further investigation. The forensic audits, I used to get some cuss in cabinet because of that too. But whatever it is, it was a cabinet decision, collective decision, and we tell the commissioner, proceed, head of SOKU will do the investigation, whatever, but you make sure that when you accumulate all your evidence, go to that gatekeeper. The gatekeeper here is the DPP. Only the DPP must charge ultimately. Do not allow any politicos to influence you, guys. Because I had my suspicions, I'll tell you honestly. So please go to that woman, Shalimar Haque, and ensure that they go through the process, her chambers and whatever, and if there is police matter, well then, because that is my policy. My policy is that all these department heads and whatever else and ministers and so on, they must go through the DPP. As an operational matter now, that when you collect your evidence, operationally you go to the DPP. She will charge or she will not charge. And that's the end of the matter, because our constitution provides for the insulation of the politicization of criminal law. And the insulator here is the DPP. Now, take, for instance, Winston Jordan. I don't know if they ever went and asked for, these policemen went and asked for anything from the DPP as to what to look for, the ingredients of the offense, because she can help in that regard. They just jump on it and like that and said that we will charge you for misfeasance and abuse. So there is a distinction, and that is why we wanted to improve upon what the PPP was doing. And that is the rule of law, and we abided by it. And if the police then went and then proceeded to take statements from ministers and charge them, well, I couldn't do anything. Nobody could do anything. It is the police now taking it to its natural course. And if, as a result, the magistrate said bail and you pass you through the chute, well, fine. It is a sorry sight. I don't like it, I tell you honestly. But that is what we did. And so when you come down to the very first step now, is it a wrongful exercise of authority of selling the property to Brian Tiwari, a contract that was made by the PPP? No, it was not. And if at any stage it had only civil liability, you can't go and do criminal liability for something like that. And that is why I'm mad. That is why I'm saying that they're taking their bloody well power here. And this, what they still regard as their honeymoon up to now, because they're always saying that, you want rig elections in a 5-month period and so on. And they're using that to utilize the chokehold. But as I said, it's a dangerous, dangerous, toxic game they're playing. So I just want to make that point.
Christopher, before I bring the others in, you raised the question of similar actions taken by the previous government. You've heard the former Minister of Public Security. Anything you wish to respond there to? Anything you wish to contest? It's only fair that I give you that chance.
No, I certainly agree with what Kemrad said. It followed a series of forensic audits. He also said Raman McRae was one of the firms. That's also true. And we did make certain recommendations. That's also true.
Yes.
So there's no dispute in that at all.
There's no dispute there. Kamraj, let me ask you a straightforward question. I know you implied it in your presentation just now. Have you ever, as minister, tried to influence what went on in the police force?
Absolutely never. And as I said, every officer's annual conference, I added that to my speech, telling them in operational matters, you are the boss. The Police Act, all the case law that you would have learned at the academy and in your training, the law is your boss. And never have I ever asked the commissioner, hey, loose the man, release this man, do that to whatever, or charge that man. That is even worse. Go and charge somebody. You can ask them, is the investigation going on? Because it's a public thing. Some investigations that took a while, and you will be told that the investigation is going on, probably because the investigating rank had gone to Region 1 instead of being in Region 4, and so on. And you have an explanation, or somebody, they haven't gotten the witness get away or something like that. That is not interference. But when you are trying your best to utilize, and you would have changed up the personnel of SOCU, I understand there have been major changes at SOCU, and you can now direct them with a phone call. Even the commissioner of police don't know sometimes. The commissioner of police did not know that a SWAT team went to Exequibo and caused that execution of Orin Boston. Somebody came back after they talked to their support base there, came and said, SWAT must go up and deal with them. And you know who was there talking to the public? It was the president himself. And this is what is happening. When you ask the commissioner and the crime chief, me and Owaga, somebody very high up in the political branch was given instructions. And then they go on and they behave like mad people, kill the man inside the mattress there, on his mattress, and then wanted to lie about it. That is so abhorrent. That is so beyond all the norms that we know in Guyana about the police force. And of course, again, what they wanted to do to the former police commissioner chairman, it is that because basically you have policemen that are, professionals basically. But some of them want a little promotion and so on. Well, by must lock you up, or shove you down the chute or something like that. That is what they're doing. And I must say that is not the larger force that I left. People who are going to want to behave, because I tried to get rid of as many rogue elements, and I managed to get rid of about 107 of them. And you have to do that. In this case here, we hear nothing that happening with the SWAT team with Orange Boston. That would not have been that long in relation to my term. But you hear all kind of other things happening now.
Yeah.
So understand it. Never did you do what is called interference with the police force's work at an operational level.
Darren Wade, you've heard your senior and your seniors, I imagine, your teacher. Would you say that you smell something? Is there interference from your standpoint as a legal practitioner and as a political observer? Is there interference in what's going on that would have led to the arrest of your client?
Oh, thank you, Professor Hines. Yes, whilst there, it was obvious. And Mr. Ranjitan is absolutely correct. Senior, once there, after we had an interview, we were asked to go outside and sit. The police officer came and said, based on the answers you gave to us, we are arresting you at this point on the charge of on the allegation rather of misconduct in a public office. We are arresting you on that suspicion or what have you, quote unquote. Yes. So there is political interference. They were having phone calls from upstairs. So at one time I went to one of the policemen and asked for bail. You have to wait for a phone call. The DPP was not engaged or anything of the sort. It was clear that directions was coming from at the top. It is clear. So Mr. Ranjitan is absolutely correct. And you could see the difference in governance. In everything that they do, you could see interference. You could see who receiving contracts. You could see who getting arrests. Their biases cannot miss you. Their prejudice cannot miss you. It is obvious. It is clear for the world to see. It is unambiguous.
And so, Darren, what does this mean for the rule of law in Guyana? What does it mean for the rule of law?
For the rule of law in Guyana. There's no confidence in the system, and that's a terrible thing. On the road, you speak to supporters, there's no confidence, in the system. And on these programs, wherever I am on this program, I try my best to defend if anything bad is being said about the judiciary and so on. To defend and to speak about the system and that judges are humans, and all these things and so forth. But the issue of rule of law, there's no confidence. Probably it's low. If you are to do a survey in relation to the confidence that persons have in the system, there's none. It is low. It's probably all time low. And the issue about this, as Mr. Ranjitan would have also mentioned, is that when the PPP starting, can they finish it? If persons started to take issues into their own hand, I bet go police station, nothing now come out. Or we're not getting court, or we're not getting no justice. So I will take it into our own hands. Can they handle the situation? They cannot. If this country should turn, the issuing arrest warrant for Rickford. If this country should truly turn, can they handle it? Certainly not. They will not be prepared.
And
because
we're going to
the
get
reality of, and when you do political science, you will know while they believe they have the power, they have the authority, they don't. When you're talking about power, if you are to look at those, they claim they have power, they have politics, but they don't have no power. They don't. So if this country are to really turn, really and truly, I remember with the issues in West Public, sometimes you have to talk, you have to calm down. Don't do this. Sometimes we help them. Sometimes we help them more than they believe that we don't. Sometimes it's the opposition, sometimes the persons like ourselves, Mr. Hines, and I've seen you done it before. Well, you gotta say, calm down, don't do this, this is not the right way, and so on. So now we are kind to them. And we assist them in governance more than they assist themselves.
Yeah.
I trust they understand and they appreciate that. Because we know it is not 2 licks the opposition is getting today from the supporters, because they believe that the current opposition is not airing the cries. They believe that the current opposition is allowing people advantage on them. They want this radical revolution. A lot of that is on the street, and I do hope that their intelligence people are going to them and say, watch, these people ready, but it's because we are saying no. Let us try this way. Let us trust the courts. Let us do this, and so forth. So I do hope their intelligence is telling them that sometimes that person are being kind to them and say, calm down, because we don't want loss of life and injury and damage of property and so forth. I do hope that their intelligence, but there's so much that we could hold back. Because at some point in time, if a revolution, if it break out while, then sometimes we going the way the last we don't to. They won't hear us.
Yeah. Yes. Selvin, let me bring you in here. You practice in Canada. I think you practice in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, you practice in Guyana. Where are we getting it wrong? Use this Winston Jordan scenario and tell our audience where our police force is getting it wrong in terms of handling these matters.
Well, I think Paul Slow spoke effectively to these issues, and what he spoke about is the professionalization of the police force, or the lack thereof, and now the politicization of the police force, where you have a commissioner who is sitting in that chair acting, but he has no power and authority over the people who are placed in certain positions and the people who are taking directions from their political bosses. I mean, the problem with the police in Guyana is SOCO has effectively become a political police, whether it was under the AP and UAFC administration or under the PPPC administration. SOCO is a political police acting at the behest of politicians. And so, you had Orfanali charged with 19 fraud charges as a result of a cabinet decision made. Now you have Jordan charged, or not charged, but arrested to be charged with respect to a decision made by cabinet. But even more than that, there was a discussion about the DPP and about lawyers. SOCO has its own cadre of lawyers. It has its own legal branch. And I understand that they've terminated the services of some of the lawyers who were there during the James running of the unit and during the AP and UFC administration. So they're bringing in a new team that certainly is going to act at the whim and fancies of the administration. And there's a certain cabinet minister who runs SOCO. Not only is a certain cabinet minister in the current government who runs SOCO, but you have certain characters that are placed in executive positions in SOCO. You have Mr. Karim Bash, who certainly is facing a number of allegations that were before the Police Service Commission. And you have also an assistant superintendent who has been acting very unprofessionally in terms of how he is dealing with these matters. I mean, certainly you talk about Canada, for example. Politicians trying to run the police force runs the risk of getting into serious trouble, not only with the public, but with the courts and with their own parliamentary colleagues in the opposition, because the police force is supposed to be independent, it's supposed to be impartial, it's supposed to be fair, it's supposed to be detached from political directions, and you don't want a police force whose command is taking direction from the public. And you heard Gary Griffith from Trinidad spoke recently that he had to put Prime Minister Rowley to his place when Rowley decided he wants to stick his nose in terms of running the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, which he had no constitutional role doing. His role is not to operationalize or command the Trinidad and Tobago police forces. His role is more direction and policy through his cabinet and through his cabinet minister. And so, the stuff that's going on in Guyana is sad, it's sickening, but with due respect to the minister, former minister, Mr. Ramjatan, both administrations are responsible for the mess that we have with the police force.
And on that note, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we will talk about the wanted bulletin for Mr. Rickford Burke. Don't go anywhere. Politics 101 will be back after this PSE. In an ideal world, Africans should be supporting Indians in areas where Indians have the advantage, and Indians should be supporting Black people where Black people have the advantage. Where are the sugar workers who got $250,000? Where are the rice farmers who get $500,000? Where are their voices crying out that this is advantage you're taking on public servants? No. They're not giving us any solidarity. It may be out of fear, but it may be that they don't care. So we have got to start changing attitude. We must not be caught in this mess again. The PPP government has to go. It has to go. But it's not going to go tomorrow. It will go through sustained pressure. We must make it difficult for them to take advantage of us. And welcome back to Politics 101, the wanted bulletin that was issued for Mr. Rickford Burke. Christopher Ram, let me get in first on this. What do you make of that wanted bulletin for Mr. Rickford Burke?
Well, again, I am very strong on this whole question of freedom of expression is guaranteed by our Constitution. I take it very seriously. But I must tell you, I've seen some actual statements by Mr. Rickford Burke that certainly does not help our situation in Guyana. Whilst we're talking about the guardrails for democracy, for example, Mr. Rickford Burke calls for not having the service commission, as though that's the thing we need. We need service commissions to keep the executive in line and in place. To say that we wouldn't have them and we must get rid of them, that's the most irresponsible call. I also want to talk. I've seen this statement that international organizations have said that they've siphoned off $5 billion United States dollars. Does Mr. Burke have any idea what $5 billion United States dollars are in relation to the Guyana economy? It doesn't make sense. And I think we have got to be, for those of you, David, I know you spend more time, you do spend a lot of time in Guyana, but we keep talking about things that we don't seem to know, and to just throw numbers out, 1,500 Black people, and to talk about genocide. We did work on some of those things David, and quite frankly, I'm very disappointed that the David Granger administration did not have a commission of inquiry into that crime spree that we had. We should have had that. But this kind of statement, I saw Mr. Burke talk about he has, based on information he's receiving, that Winston Jordan was poisoned. Mr. Jordan, that's not true. How do we want to be taken seriously? I'm not saying this does or does not justify any wanted bulletin. I don't know how it's going to happen legally anyway. Surely you'd have to bring some kind of charge. It's not because you say you're going to issue a wanted bulletin. Mr. Rickford is a citizen that I suspect of the United States of America. He boasts about the freedom he enjoys, about living in a free country. But some of these statements, David, do not help us. They are irresponsible, they are wrong, they are dangerous. And as I said, they have no basis in fact. And Sherrod Duncan, I don't know why Sherrod Duncan, a member of parliament, did not challenge Mr. Burke when he talked about this $5 billion United States dollars. What is the annual budget? That is about 4 years of the past revenues of the country of Guyana, including the years of the APNU AFC government. It doesn't make sense. And I come back to this business about the service commissions. We in Article 13 are calling for the service commissions. We calling for, because, for example, the Public Procurement Commission is one that oversees the procurement of goods and services. The Public Procurement Tribunal is a body, it's a constitutional body that you would make complaints to in relation to procurement. Why do we not want to have those things? And Article 13 is very strong. We want to see all of these things, including the Judicial Service Commission, including all of the commissions. We need to have them. Those are the guardrails for our democracy. But talking about genocide, I don't know. I don't know where the genocide is. I'd love to see the numbers. You know that Clive Thomas had put out a document. It had I think about 400 names. The PPP came back and said there were repetition, and some of them were not murdered at all. That is why we needed a commission of inquiry. To talk about, you want to have, and this is another statement I've seen attributed to Mr. Burke. It's either we have inclusive government, or we have partition, or we have civil war. You know, it's easy to say in the United States and talk about civil war in Guyana. And let's say we want partition. Where do we draw that line? These things don't make, when you get into the reality of the discussion, they make no sense. Let's have a sensible, informed discussion. The fact is, the opposition, I think there's consensus, even though certain people may not want to say this, that the opposition is doing a very poor job. Very, very poor job. It chairs the Public Procurement Commission, for example, the Public Accounts Committee, for example. It said that we're gonna publish names and we're gonna go to Parliament and all this. Let's get on with the job. We still have a democracy now. Some people may feel, well, look, let's break it up, burn it down, and all of that. Then, and who in the final analysis now will benefit? You know, I think my position, both the APNU, AFC, and the PPP have moved away from pro-poor politics and policies. I wish the WPA, which was once very, very working people oriented, and probably still is, but it's quite miniaturized. Let's deal with serious policies. Let's talk about that 7%, the imposition That's an imposition. Why are we not dealing with that? Why doesn't somebody go to court and say, let's deal with it? Why doesn't Darren Wade or Roger Ford or any one of these persons? We still have a chance to protect a flawed democracy. It's very flawed. The whole question of the power, and where it comes from, the 1980 Constitution, where one man was half the National Executive Assembly. He was the lead, and in terms of the executive and all of that, we need to look at these things. We have electoral reform in another couple of days. The period of 6 weeks for the response to the amendments to the electoral laws, the Representation of People Act, in another few days. That expires. I haven't heard a serious discussion on this matter. Those are important things. Look, we tend to think, and the PPP thinks, that it has total control. It has 33 seats. It has a majority of one. Which way Schumann goes determines another one. But is the opposition using its numbers in the parliament? Is Sherrod Duncan, has he brought a single bill to the National Assembly? Have they called for the private members' day? There has been none, absolutely none, since August 2nd, 2020. Those are the things we've got to talk about. And I want to say, look, I don't accept Ramson's statement at all. But let's remember, Ramson was goaded into that statement by hits and jams. Those are not Indians. Let's face that. That was a manipulated environment. It's not all about, and I take the point, it's not all about Indians and all about blacks. This is a national problem we have. If we try to simplify it and oversimplify it and put this all in the context of race, we are completely wrong. The poor made up of blacks and Indians in this country. When we think of Indians with resources, you're talking about a handful who are enriched further. We have a tax system that is geared against people, labor, dividends in public companies. Those companies that are talking about making billions of dollars of profits. Those dividends are tax-free. You let an employee get a damn meal allowance and he can't produce a bill, you hear he must pay tax on it. That's the kind of thing we need to talk about and get rid of all this talk about race, and as though race solves all the problems. In no country, in my view, has race solved all the problems.
Chris, let me just make sure that I have you clearly. You've listed a litany of things, well, not a litany, but quite a few statements made by Mr. Burke. Do you believe that those statements, if they're true, warrant the kind of action that the government has taken?
Well, I think I would defer to, I would love to hear Kamraj on this, but I want to say this. They are surely in violation of the freedom of expression provision of the Constitution. They certainly are intended to incite, and quite brazenly incite, racial hostility. That doesn't, so I want to make that point clear. Whether it amounts to a situation where you can bring Mr. Burke into the net, maybe by using the cybercrime legislation, but he's still not based in Guyana. So there are going to be some difficulties. To answer your question directly, do they amount to something that poses a serious threat? I would say the way they are framed, they certainly are.
Cameras, let me get you in here. You've heard Christopher. What's your take on it? Do you think that these alleged statements made by Mr. Burke warrant that kind of extreme action on the part of the government?
I don't believe so. I have an extraordinarily liberal attitude towards freedom of expression, as you know. And when I came back from University of London, I had done for the Bar Association a major article in the Bar Review called Wither the Press. And sometimes we have to understand that in a democratic country, the language can be insulting and offensive, but it is still an exercise of freedom of expression. And in the context of what I have seen and heard, it should not, it is a last resort to deal with matters of incitement when people write about this. By the way, I must tell you that the PPP already has asked the ethnic relations that certain statements I made that the PPP is behaving like a racist party, that the ethnic relations should investigate me. So every time that you call the PPP, because they're actually, I could prove it. Just like how Freddie Kissoon proved to them that they're a pack of ideological racists, and then stated that how they didn't appoint any ambassador. The man that first brought my attention to it was today my nemesis. He writing all the time about Ramjatan. It's Freddie Kissoon. And I was his lawyer at the time. And Freddie said, comrades, I'm going to justify it. And he wrote about 23 pages stating how the PPP is ideologically racist. Now, the PPP didn't try to now bring charges against him, which is on the heavier end of things. The president brought defamation. Well, I hear they had some non-disclosure document and so on, sign up, and I hear the case done. And now, Meba is on the war path with Ramjatan. Not with Barajagdeo, the person he called ideological racist. In a democratic country, and especially in a country like Guyana, I could understand. I sometimes view like the flood relief that was granted to a lot of PPP supporters as something that has tremendous racial overtones. The COVID relief. That is why I am asking, if you want to neutralize my statement that it is racist, print the names of all the people that get COVID relief in Guyana. On a tabulation format, just like how they want to print these SOPs in the electoral changes that they want to make, put them in a tabulated electronic version, print the name of all the people. 6,000 of them got COVID relief. Let me see. Print the names of all those who got and the amounts they got of the flood relief. Up to now, they can't do it. And when you are hearing a number of things going on, you are right. If you want to have what is called freedom of opinion, demonstrable opinion, opinion that could be demonstrated, this is what we are doing. Burke might be on the extreme end. I got some problems with that fella and a long time ago. But the trouble is that when you now want even to take the rights of somebody who is making opinion that might be insulting and offensive to say that is criminality, well, you are jumping a tremendous, you're making a tremendous leap. And that is my distinct difference here. It is not thus far as I have seen, because if in a democracy you cannot have these extreme views, which, by the way, still does not realize criminality. I suppose if Christopher Ram was a DPP, Christopher Ram might use a subjective element and feel that is crossing the line. That is true. If a DPP feels he is crossing the line, the DPP could say, well, fine. Has the DPP come in here before the police made an arrest warrant? I don't think so. And so it is my opinion that you want freedom to reign in Guyana. It is important that the extreme frontiers and edges of democracy be walked at this point in time so that we will know what are the edges. And that is my approach to the question. Now, I want to bring a correction. The speaker, the other lawyer from Canada,
Kelvin Peters.
Yes, right. He was saying that Irfan Ali had what is called cabinet document. Irfan Ali did not have any cabinet document. He was acting on the Housing Act. And I think that that thing that said that the police should investigate him came from Christopher Ram, who did that forensic audit. And I think that Christopher Ram had said that his role in the issuance of titles, and I can mention the titles, was well outside of his functions and powers. And then Christopher Ram recommended that there would be more police action. This is the set of people he sold the land to, without cabinet approval, but just acting under the Housing Act. I think the cabinet was too shame to go and give approval. Raja Lonchan, one lot. The wife of Raja Lonchan, Florence Ramnath, another lot. Priya Manik Chan, another lot. Jennifer Westford, another lot. Clement Rohi, Dana Ramotar Data, Lisa Ramotar, the son of Nanda Gopal, Dr. Gopal, Gansham, Raj Singh, Hering Gaisuko, Sheikh Baksh, Safraz Khan, and a number of others. Now, that is a wrongful exercise of lawful authority. You get the lawful authority, but you're not supposed to go and give it out to your friend and family, as I was saying. That is what, and they did not have cabinet approval. Cabinet been too shame. So please, I am correcting that. Don't let him give as if, there is no distinction between the coalition and the PPP. There is a big distinction. Thank you very much.
Dan, let's get in here for your take on the wanted bulletin for Mr. Burke. Where do you stand on that?
I believe it is. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your question again. Once again, I believe it's a cracking down on dissent. We are currently on an undemocratic state. The government is operating as if they have no one to answer to. And I side with Mr. Ram in the issues as he raised in the need for the checks and balances. We need a police service commission. We need the judicial we need this commission in a society. So at one point I agree with Mr. Ram. Am I of the opinion that Mr. Burke would have said things that is inconsistent with the law? I believe not. That's my respectful opinion. Mr. Ram is an attorney like myself, and he has a right to have his opinion. Is Mr. Burke's opinion views protected by the Constitution, according to me, so my understanding of the law? Yes, that's my understanding as an officer of the court and as a lawyer. Mr. Ram is an officer of the court and a lawyer. He is entitled to his own opinion. So yes, when we look on the PPP, and I would have mentioned, that's how the PPP rule. They rule by fear. They will shut you down. If they and also they want to prove to the supporters that they are doing something. Like Mr. Ramjitan, I was written to by the Ethnic Relation Commission saying that the PPP also tried them. I also is reliably informed that a very senior government official called the police commissioner and said, "Watch Darren Wade." I am also reliably informed. The Ethnic Relations Commission, they write me, I put up the letter, they say, "Mr. Wade, we have reviewed everything that you would have said, and you would have not acted inconsistent with the law." So, is everybody, the PPP, once you say something that the PPP, they're going to come after you.
There you go.
And
Selwyn,
persons like Mr. Burke, let me
sorry.
say that. And persons
Yes.
like Mr. Burke are important to the society. He is
Mhm.
essential for the sustenance of the society. Mr. Burke is critical. Because if not for Mr. Burke, and certainly, yes, sometimes I may, my opinions may vary with him. I may not always agree with Mr. Burke. I have not also heard all of the things that he would have said. But if it was not for Mr. Burke for raising some of the issues on and for stand up for the PPP, we would have been worse off. So in a democracy and where we are heading currently, Mr. Burke is a hero to us. And he must be celebrated. I, Darren Wade, filed a action against Mr. Burke on behalf of Nicolette Henry. I, Darren Wade, was a lawyer who sued Mr. Burke. That was used to sue him. I, Darren Wade. And now, I now talk and so on and then and so forth. And yes, I disagree with him. But he's critical, he's important. And Mr. Burke had some harsh opinions, even against David Granger. He said, against the former administration while he's in office, he said things about us. But even people like Mr. Burke, who drop lashes on both sides, is important for the democracy. So, and to sum up what my views, as I would have mentioned, is a censoring of dissent, and the police force should not and should never be used as a tool against its people. To settle political score, it should never be used for those things as a weapon against its people. It should not be used. And within a short time of this administration getting into power, how they have been using the police force, it's a tragedy. It's an absurdity, what we are witnessing in Guyana. Your rights and freedom are being destroyed on a daily basis. And yes, certainly there is good policemen in the Guyana police force. Majority of them. They reach me on the road, they give me respect. And the same police thanking you. The same police come and give you something in your ears. It's about 3 or 4 of them alone, at the top. And all of this mischief. They by cutting the commission of police. He knowing about nothing. But 3 or 4 of them alone at the top, creating the mischief. Those are the ones, the soup drinkers. Those are the ones are taking instructions. Go after Darren Wade. Go after Ken Rajran. Go after Rickford, Burke. Tap this person's phone. Tap the body phone. Let me listen to the conversation. It is a sad reality. And Rickford Burke is essential to put these things at the forefront. Mr. Burke is a champion of democracy. I must put it. Thank you.
Very forthright there and very interesting points raised there by young attorney Wade. Selwyn, it's always difficult when everybody has spoken on this issue, but I would love to hear your take on this issue. Is Mr. Burke protected under the free speech clause of the Guyana Constitution?
Well, this is what I'll say. Firstly, I mean the government of Guyana and the political police in Guyana, because the police is politicized through SOCO and a number of other units, they have to be very careful of being attracted to the dictatorial tendencies to reach beyond the borders of its countries to silence critics. We had that with Saudi Arabia, with what they did with the Khashoggi journalists. We had that in Rwanda with how the Rwandan government chartered a private plane to rendition one of its opponents back to Rwanda recently. And even though the man was even given the U.S. a peace medal at the U.S., he's in jail right now in Rwanda. So certainly the dictatorial tendencies that seem to have manifested itself has to be curtailed. I mean, we don't have to agree with what Rick Burke says, but the essence of free speech is one has to be able to say the unsayable, think the unthinkable, challenge the unchallengeable. And so I appreciate that Mr. Ram may not agree with some things that Mr. Burke says, but Mr. Burke has the right to say it under the free speech clause of the Guyana Constitution and the United States Constitution. And let me say this as well. Certainly, um, laying those charges against Mr. Burke, it's simply for sensational purposes. They are going to create a diplomatic issue if Guyana decides to touch Rickford Burke in any way as a United States citizen without going through certain due processes. Right now they have Paul Slow in Guyana as a prisoner, but that's simply because Paul Slow doesn't have a U.S. passport. So right now they have Paul Slow in Guyana, and he can't leave the country unless a judge says he can. So he's stuck in Guyana there until somebody makes a decision that he can leave the country and participates in the process through Zoom or whatever. But here's a man who was falsely charged with offenses for which there's no mens rea or mental element or physical element, and yet they're punishing him by even preventing him from leaving that country. And so there are certain dictatorial tendencies that are arising that people need to speak up about. And you don't have to like Rickford Burke to speak up in his defense, to say the unsayable, think the unthinkable, challenge the unchallengeable. But you need to speak up, because if the government gets away with silencing an overseas critic, those tentacles are going to be long. They're going to be using their spies, whether it's in Canada, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in Great Britain and other places, to go after their opponents and critics. Oh, and there's one more thing I needed to speak about. I needed to address the race issue. Race in Guyana, as in Canada, as in the United States and other places, are pivotal. Anti-Black racism against Black people, anti-Black racism is rampant. Anti-Black racism is part of certain communities' psyche. And some people hold unconscious biases against Black people. Some of the biases are conscious. And all of that tends to infect various systems with the corrosive effect of racism, where Black people are the primary victims of that evil. And so it exists in Guyana. And sometimes people say, well, all y'all need to resort to is race. But then when you listen to the PPP people, regardless of whether, as Mr. Ram says, Mr. Ramson was goaded into making the statements that he made those statements, and those statements reflect a bias, whether they're unconscious, whether they're subconscious, whether they're insidious, whether they're invidious. The comments were made, and the comments did not find favor with a significant aspect of the population. So we need to confront race. We need to confront race and racism head on, because the PPP may not be a racist party. The APNU AFC may not be a racist party. But we need to understand how race plays a role in politics in Guyana, and the intersection between race, politics, and even the treatment of people in the grassroots and how they are served. And one example is those cash grants of various kinds that are served in various communities, and what the requirements are to be able to obtain those cash grants. And whether
Thank you very much, dear. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, closing thoughts from our esteemed panel. The PPP is provoking violence. They want the opposition side to get so frustrated that they will engage in violence. They want that. Because they will then say, we are the victims. They will then hold up East Indians to say, look what them black man do to you. And you want to attack what we doing? Look what them black man, they're provoking violence. Let me make it very clear. I'm against violence. I've studied ethnically divided societies. And I've seen what ethnic violence does to communities, to countries. Look at the Palestinians and the Israelis. Never ending. Never ending. Look at the violence between Pakistan and India, never ending. Look at the violence in the Sudan, never ending. Look at the long violence between in Ireland there. When you study ethnic violence, it's one of the worst forms of violence in the world. One of the worst forms of political violence. There we have it. No violence. Although they try to tell us and tell our Indian brothers and sisters that we promote violence, we promote division, they sliced and diced 45 seconds from a 2-hour program that I did. And that's the reason we are playing these clips, because I don't think the Guyanese people understand what I dealt with in that program. I came out strongly against ethnic violence. I came out strongly against Black people believing that Indian people are their enemies. I said it, that Indian people are not our enemies. I came out strongly against boycotting poor Indian men and women who are selling in the market, that they are not the ones who help to make policy. That insofar as African Guyanese must be careful about how they spend, I made it clear it must be against the enablers of the PPP, including Black businesses, not just Indian businesses. And I was very clear that that woman selling or greens in the market is not the enemy. I was clear about that was not played, and they carry on their conversation about black pudding and so on. And I could care less about black pudding. I was raising fundamental questions that if the private sector got tax breaks, and as a result of those tax breaks, there is not enough tax revenue to pay the public servants a living wage, and public servants have no business shopping and spending their money in those businesses that make up the private sector. They should only buy what is absolutely necessary. And they sliced and diced it, but they're going to hear from me. Back to our business of the day. Let me say, this program has been on for almost 10 months. Tonight, we have had the largest audience ever, the largest live audience ever on Politics 101. I want to big you all up. I think it's gone up to close to 2,000 live tonight. What it shows is that this topic that we are discussing tonight has touched a nerve with our society. Closing thoughts. I start with you, Selwyn, I'll go with you first.
I would like Guyana to be a society where, to use comments from the various political parties, we live in love and unity, peace and harmony, and we have one Guyana where blacks, Indians, the East Indians, the Portuguese, the Chinese, and all races can live in peace and harmony and has equal opportunities, not only equal opportunities, but equity in terms of whether it's government contracts, whether it's in their private endeavors. All of us have a stake in Guyana, and the more we fight amongst ourselves, blacks and Indians particularly, is the more that the foreigners will exploit that, as they have done in the past and continue to do, to pillage our country. And so we must realize that we are our own best assets, and we have to love and protect each other. The charges against the proposed charges against Winston Jordan and Rickford Burke are ill-advised. It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help anyone to move Guyana forward. And let me say this: the president, His Excellency Orfanali, doesn't have control of the police, nor does the Attorney General Anil Nandalal. But they ought to use their political best offices to ensure that Guyana moves forward, as opposed to Guyana being torn apart by racial chasm and racial strife and racial conflicts. And when you're picking off black people, some of whom are considered leaders in this way, whether or not you intended to be about race, it's not an issue. It's the impact, how people perceive it or how people look at it. And so that would be my closing arguments, that race has a fundamental aspect to play in Guyana society. Anti-black racism is a big issue. Anti-black racism is prevalent. And certainly when you go after people like Winston Jordan in the way that you have, it certainly supports the view that anti-black racism is rampant and it's invidious and it's insidious and it's all ever present.
Darren Wade, your closing thoughts?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, Dr. Owens. Like Selwyn, I would like to see a Guyana where everyone could find an equal place. I would like to see a Guyana where our resources are equitably distributed, where our citizens are being protected by the law, whereby the arms of the state departments and state resources are not being used against the citizens, against the citizenry. I will encourage this administration, the AFA and Ali administration, to revisit some of your policies. Your policies as they currently are only seeks to divide our people. You're not doing good for the current and future generations. They are not sustainable. Guyana cannot survive under the current modus operandi of the AFA Ali administration led by Barry Jagdeo. We are currently in a terrible state. And I encourage you, you and your officer. You currently old reign. You're currently in seat of government. Some may say you're illegitimate. I believe that you're illegitimate. But as you are there, do the best you can. For instance, when I say at least one thing, Irfan Ali is a Muslim, and Muslims are peaceful and loving people. And I believe that it would be a government that is not totally in contrast to what I'm saying. All I'm seeing is victimization and an assault on our democracy. Thank you.
Christopher, your closing thoughts?
Yes, I do. I do want to point out that Article 146.3, which protects freedom of expression, does not relate to hate speeches or other expressions in whatever form, etc. I just want to make that point. I also want to make the point that I am opposed to all forms of race hate and these hateful speeches. You know, Miss Dr. Hines, that I am the one who brought private criminal charges against Barjagdeo. I got very, very little support from the African community. I am prepared to say that. Um, I also want to make this point to Kemraj and others. And to say, that, we talk about how much money was given to whom. We have an Access to Information Act. I can tell you today, this morning, I personally delivered to the Commissioner of Information a request for information under the Access to Information Act. And that is what people like the AFC and Darren Wade and all these persons need to start doing, getting, and do some of these things. We can get the information on who the money was handed out to. I can tell you, I've received no cash grant of any sort. And so I want to close with this final point. We are so focused on race, and foreigners are stealing our country from under our feet. Why don't we start thinking of some? I'm not defending, certainly not defending, any loss of revenue by any form of corruption. But we are so focused on race that we are allowing our country to be stolen with our eyes open, and we do nothing about it. Those are my thoughts.
Comrade Ramtatan, you have the last word.
Thanks very much, Dr. Hines. And I want to say how glad I am this afternoon with Chris and Darren and Selwyn to be here. I mean, some of the points made just now by Ram are very important and very true. We sometimes fight, and the big set of oil dealers out there hustling our profits away. And it is important that that be said, and that we do go to the institutional areas like the Commissioner of Information for the information. And I'm glad that I'm reminded that, yes, we should have done that. But as a politician, sometimes you ask the question of the minister, please put it up on your website, just like you want. And that is why I said that. I didn't mean that we couldn't go. But I want to say, because of this fight internally, we are sprinting towards calamity. And it is motivated, largely by this collision course that we have as the narratives. One, about ethnicity. Who is the thugs? For one side, it's this side. For the other side, is the other side. And we had the classic example of, even if he was goaded into it, the Ramsonian politics taking charge, as Sherrod would say. And that deals with the ethnicity. Then we got a history. Who during their course of history do this wrong as against this course of history now that we are seeing. And then the third point is that we have this very toxic digital social media environment, which is, manufacturing also a lot of misinformation and propaganda. And I see sometimes where the edges have gone beyond, where you have incitement to violence on the social media. Now, this, as you know, David, can have tremendous real-life consequences for Guyana as a whole. And so I want the president, Irfan Ali, to pick up that phone and call Joe. And in Guyana, as like the great philosophers of Russia used to say, take the swords and beat them into plowshares rather than us having a collisional course. Because, as you know, running roughshod over your rivals is a recipe for riot, which can result in irreparable ruination. So, Mr. Fanali, pick that bloody phone up and call the opposition leader. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful night, David.
And thank you. And before we go, we have a surprise guest. We want to just kind of make and get his start. Can you bring him in, Mr. Operator? Mr. Rickford Burke has dropped by. Rickford, good night. And I know you've been following the program. You have a couple of minutes. Tell us what's on your mind.
Thank you for having me, and good night to the other panelists. I heard Mr. Ram make some statements to the effect that some of the comments I made were racist. I'd like, first of all, to ask him to cite some of those comments. And let me say what I said in my interview about Winston Jordan. One, I said there must be a revolution against PPP racism. And I've always said that. There must be a revolution against PPP racism. I also said that in Guyana, African Guyanese are murdered, killed, atrocities are committed against them, and the police has been complicit. Not words to this effect. The police has been complicit, and there has been no justice. I cited the over 1,000 people that were killed. I cited the Henry boys. I cited the Mr. Boston, or in Boston, I cited Kevin Andrews. And I said, apparently, unless somebody is referring to the perpetrators of the murders and the killings and the atrocities, apparently, like this, unless somebody's run off the road, there'll be no justice, and the killing and atrocities against Afro-Guyanese wouldn't stop. Now, where I live in the United States of America, that's called speaking out. That's not insurrection. That's not sedition. And I checked today with several constitutional scholars and the district attorney where I live. And he said to me, that's nothing close to crime. You're just speaking out. And I want to say this. It's not illegal to speak out against racism. It is not illegal or sedition to call for a revolution against racism. So what Mr. Ram is doing and what the PPP are doing is they're defending racism. For them to say that I am calling for violence against them, when I said, unless somebody, a perpetrator of atrocities against Afro-Guyanese, is run off the road to prevent them from killing us, we're not going to get any justice, or the injustices against us wouldn't stop. To defend that, I think, is just as atrocious as the act. But I would like Mr. Ram to cite for me what comments I made that were racist.
Okay, thank you there. We are going to try to get you back, Rickford, on a program by yourself. We've run out of time, and Mr. Ram is not going to be able to respond to you. But we can facilitate that kind of program. I'm certainly going to have you on.
And finally, in a couple of seconds, and thanks for accommodating me, I agree with what Darren and Selwyn said. Now, first of all, I did not breach what I said. Those comments that I just made, which is what I actually said, is not a violation of any cybercrime act. Calling for a revolution, which means aggressive acts of protest. There are several meanings to the word revolution. The PPP wants to interpret what I intended, right? Only I can do that. So that's number one. So I did an interview, which is on my website right now, when I said very clearly, when we speak about protests and shutting down the country, we're not talking about any violence. I don't support any violence against anybody or damage to property. I've always said that. But I live in America where we rise up, where we have revolution. Revolution is a transformation, sudden change or transformation of a social status. That's what I'm talking about. And as I said, there's nothing wrong with a revolution against racism. It means it must end and there must be a change. Second, with regard to the Cybercrimes Act, even though I didn't breach it, the Cybercrime Act, as far as I'm aware, has no extraterritorial application. I don't understand how the government think that they could go after somebody who lives in the United States. Apparently, they have arrogated to themselves the extrajudicial power given to them by God or somebody to reach across the Atlantic and tamper with the United States, the rights of Americans under the First Amendment. No belief, philosophy, or law of the PPP trumps the United States Constitution. And I think what they have done now, and you'll see American officials speaking out, they have attacked the United States of America because I sued Barry Jabdale. This is not because of anything I said. Nothing I said is inconsistent with the law. I spoke out, I was harsh, and that's because I perceive that there has been too much injustice against African Guyanese with impunity, and there has been nobody being held accountable for it. So I want to, in closing, let me say this. I did not breach any Cybercrime Act. Nothing I said was in breach of the act. Two, the government of Guyana doesn't have some God-given inalienable right or some mandate from some alien in space or something to be racist. They don't. And if they have a mandate to be racist, African Guyanese and Amerindians and everybody else have the same right to oppose it, to fight to end it, to challenge it, to confront it, to have a revolution through protest against it. They alone don't have any rights, and it is certainly not, they believe that their racism and their dictatorial tactics derive from some law. It doesn't. So we will continue to challenge that. I'm unbothered by the bulletin. I'm in touch with United States government officials. I want to say this. The Guyana Police Force has been promoting on its website, on its Facebook page, two terroristic death threats against me, where people are calling for my head to be cut off, and where people are saying I must be brought to Ghana dead or alive. Even though the FBI has pointed out to them, they have refused to remove it. Also, Barry Jabdale last year said that there'll be no peace in Guyana if the APNU coalition rigged the election. I think that's a violation of the Cybercrime Act.
And there you have it, Rickford Burke. Thank you, Rickford, and I'm going to try to get you on as quickly as possible. Politics 101. Stay safe.
Thank you for having me, and good night to everybody.
And thank you to the audience. I know it's been a long 2 hours, but you've stood with us tonight. It's been our biggest audience. Thank you. Thank you. It means that this issue has really touched a serious nerve in our society. Good night. Tomorrow night, we have a program on Monday night. We have switched that Monday night program to Wednesday night. So tomorrow night, I'll be on. I'll be on tomorrow night, dealing with my side, hindsight, and we'll be dealing with the issue abuse of power. Abuse of power. And then on Thursday, Aubrey Norton will be on the eve of Congress. So far as we know, Congress has not been called off. So Aubrey Norton will be here on Thursday night. So we have 2 big nights coming up. Tomorrow night, my side, I'll be talking my talk. And then on Thursday night, Aubrey Norton, the front runner for the leadership of the People's National Congress. Good night, be safe, be strong, and see you tomorrow night.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.